things first. Getting settled here, getting set, ready to go on a Thursday morning. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's Chris Carter, the Hall of Famer. This is Nick Wright.
Champion.
Chris
Carter, Hall of Famer.
Big night for CC.
And New York City basketball champion, C.
Appreciate it. My young studs.
Air five.
Fam, got you, Jim.
Apologies that I couldn't be there. But we had a dozen members of the staff there cheering you on at Barclays.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Vegas had us at a 15-point favorite. We're so glad you didn't bet on us because that's what gave us that.
Yeah, you guys ended up covering.
Nice.
Speaking of gambling.
Speaking of gambling, I won some money from Nick Wright.
It's not
about the gambling. It's about taking money from Nick Wright.
If Steph's watching, just so you know,
I didn't do it,
your
Steph.
lovely wife, Steph, has been gambling for 3 consecutive days.
No, that's not true.
And text me this morning, what are we betting on tonight?
Not happening.
Just let you know.
What time it come, 2:30?
About 2:48 a.m. Jenna Wolf already getting the itch. Where are the lines? There's no NBA games tonight. And what can I gamble on? What about baseball? How do I do it? So
not in fact true. Anyway.
I got the text right here.
We've got a slate of wonderful NBA action to talk about. The postseason matchups are all set, and let's start with that. We bid a fond farewell to the 2017-2018 NBA regular season. Seedings are set. Matchups are made, and let the pundits do their thing now. Let's start in the West. No surprise, as the Rockets are the 1 seed and the reigning champs, the Warriors, they're the 2. Golden State limping into the playoffs, going 7-10 down the stretch without Steph Curry. Their matchup in the first round, the 7-seed Spurs, without Kawhi Leonard. All right, CC, let's kick the conversation off here. What do you think? Can the Spurs challenge the Warriors, given what we've seen of the Warriors down this last stretch here?
Yeah, if it's the same Warriors team we've seen the last 15 games, they would challenge them. But I don't think that this will be the same team. I think that the one thing that you will see is they will be drastically better defensively. Like, if last night, if you're a fan of the NBA, you should have watched the Denver play against Minnesota. If you want to get a snapshot of what's getting ready to happen this weekend, that's the kind of basketball you're getting ready to see. It's almost like a throwback to the 1990s, early 2000s as far as the physicality. Like, things are going to pick up. The pace of the game will pick up from a defensive intensity standpoint. Now, the pace of play, as far as scoring buckets, because, things will be more contested. I believe Golden State will be one of the leaders. They have been more successful than any NBA team. They did not forget how to win. They got a little lackadaisical at the end of the season because of trying to rest. Also, the double injury of Steph Curry. Yes, they couldn't get the number 1 seed, but I expect to see a better Golden State team in round 1 than we saw the last month of the season.
I'd like to congratulate the Golden State Warriors on advancing to round 2 of these NBA playoffs because I said a few weeks ago, I don't care if Steph's there for round 1. A team with KD, Clay, and Draymond is not losing in round 1. And then we saw this team look shaky for a couple weeks, and I start looking at the bracket. I'm like, oh, man, if they get Minnesota with Jimmy Butler coming back, Karl Anthony Towns is a tough enough matchup to where the Warriors can't necessarily play that small ball they like to do. Minnesota could give them trouble. How about Utah? One of the 4 hottest teams in basketball the last 35 games, with probably Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert, with Donovan Mitchell as a wing. Like, they could maybe push them a little bit. OKC, when you don't have Steph out there and just Russ running on hatred and energy, like, could they present them some trouble? Maybe. The one team that I was most confident the Warriors wanted to get is the team they got, San Antonio. Like, the only matchup edge the Spurs have is the coaching edge, if you ask me. Like, that's the only one.
I would say another struggle is going to be inside. They're going to have to deal with the height. Gasol, like LaMarcus Aldridge, they're going to have to deal. Can San Antonio dominate the boards? Because if they're able to dominate the boards, they're able to slow them down from getting out into transition, which that's what Golden State wants to do.
However, I agree with you there, C, but the one thing the Spurs don't have that the Pelicans had, that the Blazers had, that the Thunder had, that the Jazz had, is a perimeter player that scares you. A perimeter player that can take advantage of Quinn Cook being out there. A perimeter player that can punish you because you don't have Steph Curry to match him. DeJounte Murray is not scaring anyone. Tony Parker at this point in his career is not scaring anyone. So if the Warriors could have said, if they could have set the bracket the way they wanted it, what they would have said is Spurs in round 1, and then if we could choose round 2, Blazers-Pelicans winner works for us. Like, so I A few weeks ago, I was certain they wouldn't have any trouble in round one.
Right.
Then I had to look at the evidence from the last few weeks. I was like, oh, they get Minnesota. Maybe there could be some problems. I don't see any way the San Antonio Spurs do more than win one basketball game in this series. Not without Kawhi, and we know Kawhi's not coming back.
Okay, well, one of the players that we are going to all be focused on is the guy over your shoulder, CC, and that's Kevin Durant, who was shaky at best coming down the stretch, where a lot of people said, well, when Steph's out, you look to KD as your leader, and he'll step up, and he'll sort of guide this team and motivate and put the points up and keep them in it. He hasn't done that. How much now does KD have to prove heading into this first round against the Spurs?
Well, you're in the playoffs now. You're talking about this is where legacies are made, not in the last 12 games. To think Kevin Durant didn't, or he played bad down the stretch, it wasn't that he played bad. It's just he wasn't the type of leader that people wanted. People thought the offense was going to run through him. But you can't change the system in Golden State. That's not his fault. Kevin Durant is the second best player in the world. That's what you'll see in the playoffs. You talking about matchups? Who do they have going to be able to take him out of his game?
Right.
No one. All right, he is one of the most prolific scorers that we have ever seen. You talk about Kevin Durant, what did he say about LeBron? LeBron likes to work on his body. I like working on my shot. Kevin Durant, him and James Harden will probably be the most offensively in the first round of the playoffs. Those are the guys that present the most matchups against you. Like, I guarantee you, Kevin Durant will take the initiative to the offense. He knows what's at stake. So, and Kawhi not being there, like, they don't have the answer for KD. I expect KD to be, until Steph comes back, to take on, because you've had time to look at it, you've had time to think about it, and you're playing for everything. You can get eliminated. So I don't believe that's going to be a problem. And I believe that Steve Kerr will come up with an offensive system that will get KD involved, and they will try to get in transition.
That starts in the postseason? He'll just come up? Why hasn't he come up with it in the last couple weeks?
I think that in the postseason, you are going to scheme series by series. So you're going to have, I don't want to say a totally different system, but a different outlook against the Spurs in round one.
You have different goals.
Right, and different ways to attack, because you're playing the same team every other day, essentially, for 2 weeks. So that's
and
why,
all they've told us all year is
it's the playoffs.
We can't.
And the switch is flipped for game one. It just flips.
It's going
like
to
that?
have to for them.
Jenna, they have dominated pro basketball. Outside of Draymond Green getting suspended a couple years ago, they would be going for number 4. Okay? Not number 1, not number 2.
I know. I'm just telling you what I see and what I've seen in the last couple weeks without their guy in the lineup.
Listen, I could have bought into it with maybe a different matchup. With Minnesota, by the way, I talked about the bracket breaking well for Golden State. Houston's going to have to go through their toughest possible matchups. They're going to have to go through Minnesota, which is as good of an 8 seed because they're not a real 8 seed. They're an 8 seed because the best player on their team missed a month and a half, and then either OKC or Utah. But to answer your question about Durant, listen, this would be total disaster if Golden State does not get out of the first round, not only for the team, but particularly for him. It will, I don't want to say it would erase what he gained with that Finals MVP, but it would make people look at him in a different light. I don't think that's possible for them. Like, I don't think that's going to happen.
Barring significant injury.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Barring KD all of a sudden having to miss 3 games because he gets cracked ribs again, or Draymond something happened to him, or Clay something happening to him. Assuming they are as healthy in the playoffs as they are as we sit here this moment, I don't think the Spurs can beat them. And if they did beat them, then all of a sudden Kevin Durant's going to face a whirlwind, the likes of which he never has.
Yes, we have seen also teams struggle coming down the stretch. With the NBA season, number one, the NBA season is too long, all right? So what Golden State did, we've never seen a team like them, but we have seen teams that have been successful that they didn't care about the games in April, at the end of March, because they didn't really matter that much because they have such winning pedigrees and they're so much more talented than the other teams that they can turn it on. So it's not foreign to us that Golden State would turn it on. Cleveland has done this. We have seen other teams do this, so we expect Golden State to do that also.
What I will say, Jenna, is I'll tell you what Greg Popovich, I would imagine, is telling his team. Win game 1 and see what happens. Win game 1, steal home court, put the pressure on Golden State, have Golden State feeling like we're in a must-win game all of a sudden in game 2. Like, win game 1 and see what happens. Now, I don't think they have enough talent. I don't think their backcourt's good enough. I don't think they have enough depth on the roster. Like, I just don't think they can do that. But Pop is saying win game 1 like we could have in the Western Conference Finals last year and see what happens. That's the message he's given his team.
Is the NBA postseason like Christmas for you?
I've
never seen you this excited at 6:30
I've never done
a
show like this I'm so excited.
I see it. It's bubbling over.
So
CC, we're just going to have to keep him.
Oh, well, this is C's time, too. I'm so excited.
I know, but... Hey, coming up, could the Patriots be looking to draft for Tom Brady's replacement? Do a little basketball, do a little football. The answer next on First Things First. Hey, new topic now. There are 2 kinds of Patriots fans out there watching our show right now in the world. Those that think the team needs a backup plan for Tom Brady and those who think he'll play forever, so don't worry about drafting another quarterback anytime soon. It seems as though the Patriots themselves may be the former. They're reportedly the team most interested in Lamar Jackson. That could work if the former Heisman winner is still sitting near the bottom of the first round. Pats pick at 23 and 31. It could all line up for them if that's what they want. CC, would Lamar Jackson be a good fit with New England?
I mean, I don't see it. Based on what I've known from Bill Belichick, how he, from a defensive standpoint, first of all, how he likes to attack the quarterback. He knows football as good as any coach has ever played. And I don't think that he thinks that the running quarterback is coming back. And so I would be shocked by that. I think that his skill set, and I could be wrong. Belichick could surprise me. But what they've done, how he's attacked offenses, what they do offensively, as quick as they get the ball out of the quarterback's hand, as quick as anyone in the NFL. Now, that's not just a Tom Brady thing. That's how they run. When Tom hadn't been in there, they still ran the same system with the same types of reads. So it would be interesting if they took him to see his overall development under one of the greatest football minds ever. But I don't see. I feel like he's a better fit in New Orleans. They have Tom Savage there backing up Drew Brees. I don't believe that they're looking at him to be the starter, so they feel like they don't have their quarterback of the future in place. New England, I believe they will get their quarterback of the future in this year's draft. I don't think it's going to be Lamar Jackson. Just everything I know about Belichick and how he does things, I just believe he would target, and he's never drafted a quarterback in the first round.
Never.
I just believe that he would target another type of quarterback to fit into his system.
Well, and you mentioned New Orleans as far as maybe best case for Lamar. I'm going to throw another team out that might not be best case for Lamar, but best case for the team that's to the back end of the first round in Jacksonville. A Jacksonville team that they're in bed with Blake Bortles, but they don't necessarily want to be there. Like it's a relationship out of convenience, if nothing else. And so there are other places that I think make more sense.
Right. The one problem with Jacksonville, when you have someone who has not established himself as far as a top 16 quarterback, you put immediate pressure if you draft a first-rounder like Lamar Jackson. And also, you put in a lot of doubt in Blake Bortles' head because you could also platoon those quarterbacks.
Right.
Blake Bortles doesn't want to do that. You know, you could have Lamar Jackson run first or second down, do some wildcat stuff. So,
and for a team that right now thinks they're on the precipice, using a pick on a player.
They think they're as good as New England.
Oh,
they think they're as good as Pittsburgh.
That's a fair point. That's probably maybe the Jacksonville thing makes more sense if they weren't quite as good as they were last year. If they weren't,
and if they didn't if they were more in the developmental stage compared to right now.
Right. We think we can go make the Super Bowl. It's a great point. So here's the thing with New England and Lamar Jackson. I am one of the knocks on Lamar Jackson has been people don't think he's that bright. I don't know Lamar. I have no reason to say that's true. But what I think sometimes happens is people confuse eloquence and intelligence. I can tell you
there is that.
There is that where if someone doesn't have great diction, or if someone doesn't speak the King's English, as Chris would put it, you think their mind isn't that sharp. Lamar certainly is not the most eloquent of the quarterbacks, right? I don't know that means he's not the most intelligent of the quarterbacks. Why am I bringing that up here? Because it seems like so much of New England's offense is about communication, checking at the line of scrimmage, so many things that if you are not the most eloquent of players, even if your mind can process all of it, I think that is a bigger bridge to a bigger gulf than for most players.
Nick, I'll give you an example. Randy Moss. And I'm going to tell you, as a football player and knowing X and O's, he is a football savant. He grew up in West Virginia. I grew up in Ohio. I have a little twang, a little on my diction. I've been fortunate that I've been able to get a lot of help, so it's not as pronounced. But growing up in different parts of the country, you can develop how you speak, and it could hinder your ability to be able to communicate. So Randy Moss, to me, is one of the best examples. Like, I didn't know Randy. I saw all the interviews of Randy, and then when I got with him, I was like, my goodness. I mean, he was a sponge for football, and the things that he knew, like, I would call him like a football genius. People, when I first said that, they were like, wow, I questioned it. That's why I knew he was going to be a great fit in New England, because I knew how much he knew compared to how much he could communicate.
Right. So when you say
then now, I mean, he's gone on.
Right. To clean all that up. Yes. I don't even know if clean up's the right word, but
right.
to get work.
He's done a lot of work on it.
Right. And so Randy's a guy that I think if people just heard him talk coming out of Marshall, they'd think unfairly that he wasn't that bright. When in reality, he had an accent, he didn't have the greatest maybe grammatical rules, but his football mind was there. So I wonder if some of that's happening to Lamar, where people assume he's not bright, when in reality, it's just he doesn't speak the way, a lot of us many people were taught to speak, or many people grew up speaking. Go ahead.
There's a reason this report came out. What is it do you think the Patriots see in Lamar that, knowing the way he plays and his style and what he can and cannot do, that would actually help the Patriots if he's not going to step up right away and be Brady's back?
First of all, when we're getting ready for the draft, there's a lot of reports, there's a lot of people saying things. There's also a lot of smoke that people will throw out not because their interest, because someone else. New England might be throwing this out there because they're drafting at the 23rd spot. Yeah. The Saints are at 27. So sometimes it's about positioning. I don't believe that they're as interested. This draft process and what people say, a lot of time it's just throwing people off course. New England, they're not a team. If they were interested in him, we wouldn't know it.
You wouldn't know about it.
No.
What about one other thing? I remember Coach Mangini, and by the way, Lamar was a better college quarterback than Brad Smith, and Lamar, I think, is going to be a successful pro quarterback. But Jenna brought this up in the morning meeting, that Coach Mangini talked about when he called Brad Smith and said, we're drafting you with the Jets.
Right.
We're going to give you every opportunity to work at quarterback, but we're going to use you in other ways. Do you think that is at all a possibility with the New England thing? Like, hey, we're going to groom you as a quarterback as well, but we're going to try to get you on the field in other circumstances.
Bill Belichick can do whatever he wants with my talent, all right? Like, he knows what's best, and he knows what's best way to introduce me to the NFL. And he feels like I need to play something else until Tom Brady, because you have to realize what's behind that. Like, you're going to take over for the New England Patriots. Like, he's making a commitment to you. He can do whatever he wants with my talent. I would trust him. A whole bunch of other people, I wouldn't trust them. But I would trust Bill Belichick that he would do what was best for him.
Then there's the irony that yesterday we spent the whole show saying the knock on Josh Rosen was that he might be too smart.
Hey, you got a Goldilocks zone of intelligence.
The knock on Lamar Jackson that he might not be smart enough. These are all rumors. They're all swirling around.
Maybe we need to be careful with the reports that we report on.
Coming up, have we seen the last of Des Bryant in a Cowboys uniform? The answer next on First Things First. Last night, Dwayne Wade and the Heat closed out their regular season against the Raptors. Doesn't feel like it, but this is D-Wade's 15th year in the league. Here's what he had to say post-game about that accomplishment.
When's the last time somebody drank champagne out of a flute in this locker room?
It's a long time ago.
You guys never, when you did drink champagne in here, I don't remember glasses. Yeah, it was.
No, so me and UD celebrated our 15th year together. I mean, this was just me and UD. This is the vets celebrating the end of regular season of our 15th year. It really means something. Every time you complete a season, especially as you get up there. So we in the back, both of us a little tipsy. We didn't drink a lot.
Anytime you can drink with your shirt off is an interesting way to drink.
Well, that's one way to look at it. Udonis Haslem, by the way, this guy is an unbelievable story. Like, D. Wade playing for 15 years makes sense. The guy's top 5 pick, star at Marquette, future Hall of Famer. UD being a Heat lifer and doing what he's done.
Yeah,
He's
Miami native.
Miami native, played high school basketball under Frank Martin, now the South Carolina head coach. This guy has just been a hard work all-star forever. And for him to still be on an NBA roster along with D-Wade is so great.
Yeah, it's a tremendous credit to Mickey Erickson, the great owner of the Miami Heat. He believes in having the players for a lifetime. Lonzo Mourning, great Heat player, working with the organization. Them kind of mending their fences with Dwayne Wade, bringing him back. So it does mean something to certain teams. And in Miami, and Pat Riley, Mickey Erickson, they do it the right way.
Absolutely.
It's a great story. Can I just say one thing before we move on?
Yeah.
Is that a chain tattooed around? Because if it
yes.
is, I'm just...
Yeah,
you wouldn't have to actually go
rosary.
get...
It's a
rosary. Okay. I didn't know if it was a rosary. I couldn't see all the way down, but I'm just saying it would be one way for you not to have to go out and get it.
Oh, you're saying for me
is I could have just gotten... you want to get another chain in this way.
I wasn't talking about any of that. I don't exactly have the chest for those big tattoos. Not exactly doesn't fit my...
Took me a long way to get you there, but I did.
My body.
Stories to start your morning. Last night, the T-Wolves edged out the Nuggets 112-106 in overtime to clinch the last playoff spot in the West. One of the rare win-or-go-home regular season games. So what does Minnesota get for their big win? Only the 65-win Rockets in the first round. Nick, can the T-Wolves put up a fight against Houston?
I think they could win 2 games. I don't think they can get it to a game 7, but I think they can win 2 games. I do. I think that is the team, Houston, of the likely first-round matchups, the least likely, the one they least wanted to face in Houston. I think that you've got 2 legitimate all-stars in Minnesota. So, I would be shell-shocked if they beat the Rockets. That would be a total debacle for them. But I think they could win a couple games. I think this could go 6.
Congratulations to the Timberwolves' first playoff berth in 14 years. Jimmy Butler. Only playing 3 games after missing an extended amount of time. They needed all 3 of those wins to get him in. And last night, played over 45 minutes. That was a good basketball game. It was nice. A little preview of what we're going to see, the type of intensity in the playoffs. Timberwolves' defense got to get better. If not, I'm looking at 4-1. But their defense, bro. Man. Their defense, not good.
And, by the way, if you watched last night, you got a preview of playoff officiating. Gonna let them play now. Gonna let some contact happen. Not gonna blow a lot of whistles now. Let the guys figure it out.
All right, the Trailblazers hosted Donovan Mitchell on their Jazz in the season finale last night. Damian Lillard dropping 36. The win gives Portland the 3 seed. They will face the Pelicans in the first round. Chris, how dangerous is this Portland team?
Man, they're dangerous. They had a great season. With Damian Lillard leading them, C.J. McCollum, also that double, that 1 and 2, where you can play one at the point guard, play the other one at the 2, and the way they run their offense. I like watching Portland play. I believe this is going to be a good series. And also, this lets you know the depth of what we have in the West. We talked about the last highlight with Minnesota being the 8th seed, Portland having a spectacular season. No one would have thought they would have been the 3 seed. So I look for them to advance. Man, this is a dangerous team. I wouldn't want to play Portland.
Well, listen, I think the Pelicans are a tough matchup for them. I mentioned that earlier, but I still would favor the Blazers in that series. They then are going to play the Warriors in round 2. I think the Warriors are a terrible matchup for them. However, if you're the Blazers, what you're thinking is this. If Steph is not 100%, and he's going to have to chase around, can't hide him against the Blazers now. There's 2 all-star guards or 2 all-star caliber guards.
Yes.
So if Steph's knee isn't 100%, he's going to have to either guard Lillard or McCollum.
No, you know who he's going to guard.
Well, he's going to guard McCollum.
Yes.
I understand that. But still, that ain't great. So, if you're Portland, what you're thinking is if we can get past the Pelicans, a lot of our chances of being dangerous have to do with the health of Steph Curry's knee. Because if Steph is close to or at 100%, the Blazers, I don't think they can put up much resistance against Golden State.
All right, the Knicks fired their head coach last night. That's what happens when you go 60-104 in the last 2 seasons. That's the 6th worst record in the NBA over that span. So the Jeff Hornacek era is over in New York. CC, what do you make of this move by New York?
I'm not surprised at all. I went to a bunch of Knicks games this year, and you knew that gradually that they were trying to change. They have to make some changes with Porzingis. What is he going to do? Are they going to be able to keep him here? Coming off of a knee injury, they love him, want to build a team around him. Scott Perry, the new general manager, he comes over. He's got to be able to make a move. That's not his coach. He should have the right to go out and be able to get his coach. I like the fact that they did it immediately. So now if there's someone out there that they like, they can immediately get on top of it. I need the Knicks to be good. I'm here in New York. That's the team I go to watch all the time.
Listen, the name people are going to talk about is Fizdale. He's on the market as a possible fit in New York. I'm going to throw a name out there that's not on the market, a guy who might have run his course in Los Angeles. What about Doc Rivers? If Doc Rivers, who didn't want to do a rebuild in Boston, left there to go to L.A., now L.A. is in a rebuild. Boston, obviously, back near the top of the league. If he is okay with dealing with this version of the Knicks, building around Kristaps, that's a name I would just keep that in mind. He had some of his power stripped away this offseason. See what Los Angeles and Steve Ballmer wants to do. If not that, I think David Fizdale is the most likely option to be the next head coach of the New York Knicks.
I think I'm going to call my source. I think I might be able to get some intel on this.
I would imagine so.
You know, he not up yet.
On to one of the feel-good stories of the night. Markelle Fultz, the #1 pick of the 2017 draft. Remember, he missed 68 games with that shoulder injury. Well, last night, he became the youngest player in NBA history at 19 years old, 317 days, to record a triple-double. Good for him. Sixers will face the Heat in the first round. Nick, with a healthy Fultz and Embiid, how far can this Sixers team go in the playoffs?
Man, they can be in the Final Four now. They can be in the Eastern Conference Finals. And they can, by the way, put a scare into Cleveland. I would argue Cleveland is looking at Philly with more trepidation, more concern than they have any Eastern Conference team since LeBron got back there. I know the Hawks won 60 games. The first year LeBron was back, they swept them. I know the Raptors have thought they were close. The Raptors one time took them to 6 games. But that series was really never that close. Cleveland was clearly never worried about Boston last year. They said, Boston, take the 1 seed. Go ahead. We'll steal it back in game 1 of the series. Philly's dangerous. And if we're talking about Philly and Cleveland, the one other thing that Philly, if that matchup happens, that plays in their favor, CC, is by the time the Eastern Conference Finals come around, Philly's no longer a team without playoff experience. They'd be a team with a bunch of guys with 2 rounds of playoff experience. Like, if you make the playoffs one year and get bounced in the first round, the next year we say, oh, you've got playoff experience because you played 5 games. If Philly gets to the Eastern Conference Finals, they will have played 10, 11, 12 playoff games. I still think Cleveland is the drastic favorite in the East. But as I've been saying for the better part of a month, if you tell me Cleveland doesn't make the finals, who does? My answer is the Philadelphia 76ers.
How far can they go? They're one of the best teams in the East. You got Toronto, Cleveland, and Philadelphia, in no particular order. How will Joel Embiid come back? How will he be with contact? We talked about the Denver-Minnesota game. Now, Joel Embiid couldn't have played in that game. That game was too physical for him to go in there with a facial fracture. The one thing that I'm concerned about, I don't agree with Nick that if you do win 2 playoff series with this young team, that now all of a sudden you do have playoff experience. No, because you've never faced a superstar. If you go through 2 rounds, you ain't faced no one. So, yeah, you do have some experience, but to say that it's removed, that, oh, now you have experience, no, I don't go there. Had they ever been pushed, where they were down in a series, where they lost at home.
Right.
There's a number of other factors that really give you playoff experience, and you don't know what you don't know. And I just believe having a young team, they're going to be listening to us, listening to other people talk about the playoffs. It's hard to stay in this moment and concentrate game to game when you've never been able to do it. So I'm concerned that all the praise that people are giving Philadelphia, that as a young team, I don't know how you don't block that out.
Well, and I'm going to add one other thing about their first-round matchup. I got a text from an NBA guy that I have a ton of respect for in the middle of the night, basically once these matchups came out, and it said, I got Miami over Philly in the first round. And I thought about that. And here's the thing. We know Embiid's not playing game 1. We also know Embiid and Whiteside have a bit of a rivalry, and Coach Eric Spoelstra has seen how teams would guard LeBron when they didn't think LeBron's jump shot was working. Ben Simmons' jump shot will never be working.
Right.
Will he try to use some of the way the Spurs guarded LeBron in the 2013 NBA Finals on Ben Simmons? I don't think Miami...
How'd that work out for the Spurs?
Well, for the first 5 games, it worked well. Then LeBron's jump shot came around. Yeah. But the thing is, with Simmons, you don't have to worry about the jump shot.
Yeah, I just wanted people to know.
Right, of course. It ended up not being successful for them.
But quickly, and then we're going to move on. You said that the Cavs are drastic favorites over anyone else. You don't think the Sixers are right up there? You think it's that big of a discrepancy, CC?
I just believe it's a play on words. I don't have a word that they're all bunched up.
He doesn't think they're drastic favorites, to answer your question. Like, you don't think, you think Toronto,
I just much rather not say that because the teams are very, very close, and we've never seen Philly in the playoffs. So
who knows?
What do we know?
Let's move on to football. You remember that long-awaited meeting between Jerry Jones and Des Bryant? You know, the one that was supposed to happen about 300 times already? You know, the one where Des is most likely going to be asked to take a pay cut, but he's already said he doesn't want a pay cut, so it's probably going to be awkward. That one? Well, it's reportedly happening Friday. Bryant is due $12.5 million with a $16.5 million cap hit in 2018. Cece, how badly do the Cowboys need to make it work with Des, given what the rest of the wide receiver pool looks like in the league right now and what's available to them in the draft?
Well, it's in their best interest. It's always in your best interest to continue to cultivate and develop the talent that you have made an investment, not only in draft pick, not only in resources, in time. It would be in their best interest now. They have a lot of faith in the new wide receiver coach that they have, that he can add something to Dez's game, because they don't have a number one receiver. Like, you can't have Super Bowl aspirations, have the way the team is built, and not have a guy that you can go to, a guy you're expecting to get 1,200 yards, a guy you're expecting to get 7 to 10 touchdowns, and you're not going to have that on Dallas's roster if you cut Dez. Dallas, they should have been talked to Dez. It shouldn't have gotten to April. It shouldn't be to this point. They should have talked to Dez before free agency opened up. Now, the reason why they could only be a limited participant in free agency, that's because of their salary cap and their salary cap restrictions. But they should have been talked to Dez. This is not a conversation I would be wanting to have with an owner. You know, where people have talked about it in the media, oh, he needs to take a pay reduction, and it's going back and forth, back and forth. Typically, these meetings don't go well for the player.
I want to ask you a hypothetical question, so please indulge me on this, because I want to know what you think would happen in this scenario. Jerry meets with Dez and Dez's agent. They talk about that pay cut. They talk about what you've talked about. Hey, you can get the money back with incentives. Like, here's what we're going to do. Because Dez is a $16.5 million cap figure this year. $12.5 million in salary, a $16.5 million cap figure. And if Dez and his agent flatly say, no, not a dollar less, I am playing only under this contract, your only other option is to cut me. That is it. If they will not give an inch, what would you do if you were the Dallas Cowboys?
Start packing his stuff.
You would?
Yep. Start packing his stuff.
So you would? You'd be willing to cut Dez? Okay. That's what I'm asking. You'd be willing.
Why am I having a conversation? Like, you can't put a gun to a guy's head unless you're willing to do something with it.
Yes.
Like, why are we having the conversation? I haven't seen the owner, Jerry Jones. If Jerry Jones decides he's going to have a conversation with you about money, Jerry Jones is going to win that conversation. He's going to win that. And you talk about what leverage does Dallas have. What leverage does Dez have? Dez is worth more in Dallas. Dez's brand is worth more in Dallas. All Dez knows is Dallas.
Agreed, which is why I think the logical solution for both sides is to do the type of contract you've talked about. Reduction in pay, but you can get it back if you hit these thresholds. But I've learned too much over the years covering pro sports that we can't just say, oh, both parties are going to act logically. Both parties are going to say, we're going to do what is logically the right thing here. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Dez and his representation would say, no, we'll call your bluff and see if it's a bluff. Now, you're saying it's not a bluff.
Okay, look at the salary cap. Look where you can go to get $12 to $15 million. Where else can Dez go? Almost nowhere. Correct.
Oh, okay. Almost nowhere, and certainly nowhere with the branding of Dallas, and certainly nowhere with the championship aspirations of Dallas. Teams that have that type of cap space, I mean, San Francisco might. The Jets definitely do. Cleveland definitely does. Not places.
Wow.
Right. No.
That's warm and fuzzy.
But the flip side to that question is, and if I were Dez's agent, what I would be saying is, okay, you're right. Where can he go get that money? You look at the free agent wide receiver market. Where can you get even this lower level production? Where are the 900-yard receivers, 7 touchdown receivers, which what does is been?
Sometimes you get caught up in that, and sometimes you lose your job, all right? You try to overplay your hand, all right? Jerry Jones has all the cards. To trying to think that Dez has some type of leverage after Oh, not a 1,000-yard season this year. Oh, not a 1,000-yard season 2 years. Oh, not 1,000 yards in 3 years? Like, come on, man, let's get real. Let's get real. You're not worth $16 million. Let's come to an understanding. I love the Cowboys. Dez is better off served in Dallas. I believe he can get back to 1,000 yards in Dallas. It was hard enough for Dez to get comfortable in Dallas. I just don't know how quick he can get comfortable somewhere else. And there's not that type of money out there.
Is there something to read into and why this has been such a delayed meeting? We've been talking about this for months, about this conversation. Why have we waited so long? If we know Jerry Jones and the Cowboys want him to take a pay cut, and we know Des Bryant doesn't want to take a pay cut, we all know everything. Why are they waiting so long? I don't know if that's part of the play.
Well, a couple things have happened. Dallas went through the rest of their roster. They made some adjustments in contracts so that they could get under the salary cap, get more salary cap dollars. And they participated with Allen Hurns in free agency. They signed a couple other players. Their biggest question hadn't been about Dez. It's been about DeMarcus Lawrence, their defensive end, franchising him. So it's just a business NFL timing thing.
And if the Cowboys are run well from a front office perspective, and they have been the last few years, what I think also probably happened was they do their own prognostications about what free agency is going to look like, what guys are going to sign for. And I would imagine one of the reasons they wanted to wait, because you would think waiting hurts the Cowboys, because of the point I'm making. Unless their analysis showed, well, what's going to happen is you're going to see receivers who have been far better than Dez sign contracts for far less than what we're paying Dez, and that helps our argument more. Sure. That helps.
And those spaces get taken.
So there's less.
Those dollars get used. So you have less spots that you can land.
Right. All right, let's take a break. Let's go back to the NBA playoffs. How much harder is the Cavs' road to the finals now that they're the 4 seed? Next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, we welcome in the czar, former NBA head coach Mike Fratello. Coach, thanks for being with us.
Coach.
Morning, gang.
Now the fun begins. Yeah. Right? You've had 82 games of semi-fun, and now we have the next season to talk about. Nick's excited. CC's excited. Headline, the Cavs made the playoffs. Smaller headline, smaller font, of course, as the 4 seed. Cavs lost to the Knicks last night. LeBron played just 11 minutes, but still enough to notch 10 points and still enough to say he's played all 82 games this year. So they play the Pacers in the first round and then likely match up with the top-seeded Toronto Raptors in the second. All right, Coach, let's take a step back and break it down. How much does it matter that the Cavs are in that 4 seed?
Well, what matters is, and going back to what you just mentioned last night, if they kept looking up at the scoreboard, they saw that Philly jumped out to that 30, 35-point lead right away in the first quarter. They were not leaving any doubt that they wanted that 3rd spot. Cleveland looks at it. They figure Philly's not losing this one. Interesting, I was following it, and once he got to 11 minutes and the 10th point went up, it was like, sayonara, he's gone. What it means to him now is that, one, they open up with a team who has beaten them 3 out of 4 times this season in Miami. In Indiana, excuse me. Yeah. And they just seem to have the Cavs number. They just played well each time they played him. They made shots. Oladipo was tough for them to defend. But earlier in the year, everybody was tough for Cleveland to defend. Now, whether they can get the defense back together, that remains to be seen. Past that, and we all know that LeBron has never lost in the first round of the playoffs. I think it's 12-0 in first-round games. Then they meet up with Toronto in round number 2. And Toronto having the best record in the Eastern Conference, the problem there is Cleveland has knocked them out the last 2 years. So Toronto's carrying the chip on their shoulder of, we can't beat these guys to move on to the finals. So we'll see.
And Cleveland's beat them in really emotionally devastating fashion. If you remember, it was against Toronto in Game 1 of the series that Cleveland was throwing alley-oops off the backboard. First quarter of Game 1. There was no concern. They've never had concern with Toronto. When the one year that Toronto won a couple games, when they didn't get swept 2 years ago, LeBron was asked after Game 4, going into Game 5, how much adversity is this? 2-2 to make it to the NBA Finals. And LeBron said, one of the more low-key, arrogant things he's ever said, I've faced a lot of adversity in my career. Yeah. This ain't it. They've never shown any type of concern towards Toronto. Indiana, though, is interesting because where have the Cavs been terrible from Game 1 to Game 82? Backcourt production. Where's Indiana at its best? Victor Oladipo, the most improved player in the league this year, a fringe all-NBA guy. Additionally, we know the Cavs have said they are going to go with a LeBron, Kevin Love, Jeff Green front line. Man, people are going to get to know Miles Turner in these NBA playoffs. Miles Turner's a good player, and he's a legitimate low-post threat, even if that's not how they run their offense. If you've got Jeff Green on him, they will all of a sudden say, you know what, we can take advantage of that matchup. I don't think Cleveland will have a ton of trouble with Indiana, but I don't think it's the best matchup for them. And you mentioned it. They did beat them 3 out of 4 times.
I think it's a great matchup for Cleveland from this standpoint. When will they get their lineup back together? Like they still have not played a game with all the players with all the trades and everything, one game. Coach, I know you would like this, traveling from Cleveland to Indianapolis. Like, teams not going to get travel. If they can make short work of them, then they can get some rest before they would face Toronto. Now, I would love to face Toronto in the second round. I would love to be able to knock them out. Like, if I have that type of confidence, no need to wait for the finals. I'd be getting ready for Philadelphia. So I think there are some benefits with them being the number 4 seed. But, Nick, you're a historian. LeBron hadn't done anything from less than 1 or 2 seed. So that's something to watch. There's a reason why Cleveland is the number 4 seed, and that's because they were inconsistent and they played a lot of bad basketball and some bad defense. So does that defense creep into the postseason?
Cleveland had seasons within the big season this year. The beginning of the season after the trade took place, then they still are waiting for their main piece, which was Isaiah Thomas, which never appeared for 37 games. Then
Then never appeared when he started playing either.
Well, then when he did play, it was more of a disaster than it was at the time that he came back. And after 6 go out and 4 new ones come in, now they're trying to put this whole thing back together. And then the injuries. Tristan Thompson goes back out. Kevin Love breaks his hands. George Hill sprains his ankle. One after another kept dropping. LeBron James is looking around. He's the one guy that just remained consistent throughout the whole thing. He was a triple-double every night and carried this team really to the 4th position with home court. They very easily could have slid back to 5, 6, or 7 as they were playing at that time.
Given everything you just said and the way you spelled out the entire season, is it possible that even without a starting roster, a final roster that you're going to see in the playoffs, they may be playing their best basketball right now heading into the postseason?
I don't know if Tyronn Lue knows who his rotation is going to be as of today. This first round could be their practices because the guys that have been out, he's been starting different lineups the last 5 or 6 games of the regular season. So now, who do I come in with first off the bench? He made the commitment of Kevin Love at the 5 spot rather than Thompson or Larry Nance. Is one of those 2 guys out of the rotation now?
Listen, this is something, and you and I was talking about this, saw this up close and personal, Game 81. Since they've made the front line be LeBron, Green, Love, in the couple games since then, Ty Lue has done something that is baffling to me, which is played Nance and Thompson simultaneously. You can't do that.
Which was a very short-lived experiment.
But he did it in consecutive games. It was short-lived in both games. It's like, I think it's because he doesn't want Thompson to be out of the rotation. He's one of only 4 guys on the team that's won the championship with him, that's been there for the full run. But he would be the odd man out. Like, Tristan Thompson would be the guy that if he's not your starting center or your backup center, your third-string center does not get on the court in the NBA playoffs.
Nick, who loves Larry Nance? LeBron James.
Absolutely.
He loves Nance because Nance is high energy. When he throws it, Nance finds it and finishes the ball. So now you've got the problem, like you said, the respect of Tyronn Lue. Look at the respect he gave Wade when he came in the beginning of the year. He took J.R. Smith, took him out of the starting lineup to put Wade in out of respect for everything Dwayne has done. That wound up taking J.R.'s head, and he puts his head down because he's not starting anymore. So he has great respect for the players. Thompson's part of the 3 times to the finals. How do you work it in?
Yeah, well, Larry Nance Jr. is Tristan Thompson from 3 seasons ago.
With a better offensive game.
Yeah, and LeBron can see that. Like, they're a better team with Nance playing a role coming off the bench.
Jen, I will add this, because you're right, and CeCe made the point, and it's amazing. 82 games of the regular season. 0 games with the full complement of players they're going to have for the playoffs. There's not been a single game that was played where the roster, as it is now, was fully healthy. The first game they hope will be game 1 of the playoffs. The reason that is less of a concern in the playoffs than the regular season, as odd as it sounds, is LeBron, instead of playing 37.5 minutes a game, is about to play 42 or 43 minutes a game. And when you only have to figure out 5 or 6 minutes a game of non-LeBron rotations, it's so much easier. Because guess when Jeff Green plays his best basketball? When LeBron's out there with him. Guess when Kyle Korver plays his best basketball?
I play my best basketball when LeBron's out there.
And so you're not going to have those big stretches of time without LeBron James the way you do at the beginning of the second quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter in the regular season.
Coach, stick around. Got more to talk about. Coming up, should the Warriors be on upset alert against the Spurs? That's next on First Things First. Back here, First Things First with Mike Fratello. The NBA regular season is over, and the playoff picture is set. No surprise in the West, as the Rockets are the 1 seed and the reigning champs. The Warriors are the 2. Golden State just limped into the playoffs, going 7-10 down the stretch, missing their leader in Steph Curry. Their matchup in the first round, the 7-seed Spurs, missing their leader, Kawhi Leonard, who's played just 9 games this season. Coach, can the Spurs challenge the Warriors in the first round?
I wish I had a special announcement right now that Kawhi will be back.
Wouldn't that be great to announce?
Certainly would. I think San Antonio would really appreciate that.
Pop would be like, there you go.
But having dropped 3 out of the 4 games this season to Golden State, Pop has been obsessed the last few years of finding ways to beat Golden State. And let's go back to game 1 of the playoffs a year ago when, what were they up 20, 18 points against Golden State, and Kawhi goes down. And Kawhi goes down, and that was the end of it.
Yep.
And they were, by the way, that was midway near the tail end, or midway through the third quarter. So I say that to say this. They couldn't hold. It'd be one thing if, they had this big lead, Kawhi gets hurt, they then lose the series. They lost that game. Once Kawhi went down, they couldn't even hold a near 20-point second-half lead, which I think goes to your point. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is just how important that piece was. And this team has waited the entire season. And look, you guys might know what's going on behind the scenes, but this is very strange. Whatever has gone on, whatever the division is between Kawhi's camp and the Spurs organization, very unlike the San Antonio organization to have something like this happen. And you have to scratch your head and say, what's going on?
Let me fill you in.
Tell me.
All right? The organization, the doctor said clearly Kawhi. Kawhi went back out there. He felt discomfort when he was playing. He's like, I'm not 100%. I can't play. They kept telling him that you are 100%. He decided, said, no, I'm not. And I'm going to go get a second opinion. So in doing that and trying to get comfortable, he could never get where he thought he could play 100%. He felt like they weren't listening to him and didn't believe him. Like he had some other motive. And there's people around Kawhi's camp that felt like San Antonio's streak of making it to the playoffs was more important than Kawhi's health. So that's also behind the scenes what they've been battling.
Yeah, and one of the things we should mention about that situation that took place, they were never informed, San Antonio, the front office, that he was going on his own with his camp for this second opinion in New York City. So all of a sudden, word gets back, and somebody goes up to the head coach and says, I saw Kawhi. Oh, really? Where? In New York City at the clinic. Yeah. And I was like,
City MD.
Oh, okay. Like, wouldn't you tell the team that's paying you X number of dollars and wanting to give you X number more when your contract
right, because you could still accomplish that.
Just
you could still get the second opinion.
I'd like to get a second. You're entitled to.
The disconnect between Kawhi and the Spurs will be the biggest storyline this offseason that isn't where LeBron James is going to go play basketball. It will be the clear-cut second biggest story of the offseason. But there was a lot of speculation. Will Kawhi come back? Is he coming back? He ain't coming back. So the Spurs are going to be playing Golden State. What's up, Steve?
I told you he wasn't coming back.
Okay, yeah, a while ago you did. That is correct. We were the Spurs seemed to think he might be coming back on a certain date. I remember a Thursday a few weeks ago.
October something. Remember that? We all waited.
But it never came. So here's what we know. The Warriors have played the Spurs 4 times this year. Spurs won once. The one they won, Steph didn't play, Clay didn't play, KD didn't play. So throw that game out. I'm looking at the 8 teams that made the Western Conference playoffs, Coach. If the Warriors could have picked any one as their first-round matchup, I believe they would have picked San Antonio. All of a sudden, the Warriors not being the 1 seed, is actually working for them in the first round. Because Minnesota, you can squint hard enough and say, oh, no Steph, Jimmy Butler back, Karl Anthony Towns. Like, that could be a tough matchup for them. They are delighted right now. Now, they might feel differently in the Western Conference Finals when they don't have home court. But they are delighted right now they're the 2 seed. They got, of all the teams they could have gotten, except for Denver, who didn't even make it, the team they most wanted to get in the first round. Like, this was what happened last night worked out beautifully for Golden State.
Yeah, San Antonio's a team, the last 10 games, they're 5-5. Jenny, you talk about Golden State struggling coming in. Golden State didn't have anything to play for. They had no need to strive to close it out really strong. They were 4-6 in their last game. So I don't look for this to be a tough matchup. You mentioned Popovich. One of the things right now that he would love to do would be able to solve the puzzle of the Golden State and what they do with their offense. He never thought that he'd be solving that equation without Kawhi Leonard. So without that two-way player, the best two-way player in the world, like, they don't have a chance in this series. I think San Antonio knows it. They have, in boxing, a puncher's chance, and that's because they have Pop. All right? And that's the only reason.
I don't know how much Pau Gasol has left in him right now to be productive at this level in the playoffs. But if you think back when they put this puzzle together in San Antonio, Cousins, DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, it was LaMarcus Aldridge and Pau Gasol. Could you play big, 2 big guys, and be successful? And I think that's how they looked at it initially when they put it together. And then they saw that Pau maybe couldn't do it every night at the same level he had done it. So Pau was asked to go to the bench and come off the bench. But for them to beat Golden State, they have to make every shot. Danny Green has to make shots, okay?
Patty Mills
has to make shots. Bertans, if he comes to the game, has to make shots. And then Tony Parker has to give him minutes. All those guys have to play at the top of their game. But as you mentioned, for Golden State, they get to rest the guy that is the key to their success, and that's Curry.
Right.
He can take a little bit longer to come back now because of the matchup.
Go ahead, Jenna.
I was going to say, nobody more disappointed that Kawhi Leonard's not playing than Pop, because this would have been the one opportunity you have to really have an advantage here.
Well, and keep in mind,
series.
Golden State and the Spurs never played each other this whole run. This was a Spurs era in the West that laid way to the Golden State era in the West. Golden State took that from them without ever beating them in a series. Because the first 2 years in the playoffs, they didn't play the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs got knocked out by the Clippers, got knocked out by Oklahoma City. So Golden State never had to take the Spurs off the corner. Last year in the Western Conference Finals, we thought, we're going to get to see it. The team that went to back-to-back finals 2 years prior and 3 years prior against the team that had gone to back-to-back finals the last years in Golden State. And we thought we were going to get an epic series. Then Kawhi gets hurt. And even though it's a different injury, everything's been different since then. Multiple injuries since then, and now we're not going to get to see it, theoretically, as long as Kawhi's a Spur. Like, this could be Kawhi's last season as a Spur without ever getting to see the Warriors and the Spurs at full strength go up against each other.
Quickly, before we move on, is this the series you're most looking forward to seeing in the West? Is there another one you have your eye on?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think an upset could happen very easy is that New Orleans-Portland series. New Orleans they're a tough out right now.
Yes. Alvin Gentry's done a tremendous job.
Rondo, he's a championship guy. Okay?
Yes.
He's been there. He understands. He has really asserted himself and trying to be a leader for this team. And Anthony Davis is playing out of his head. The series that, besides that upset one, Oklahoma City and Utah, that could be something else.
That's a coin flip to me.
Yeah, it really is.
A lot of fun to look forward to there. Coach, thanks for hanging out with us today. Appreciate the
Thank
insight. Hey, coming up, why is Russell Westbrook getting criticized after averaging a triple-double again? That's next on First Things First. Hey, Nick, how long has the NBA been around?
72 years?
That is correct. Fair to say it's hard to become the first to do something in a sport that's been around that many years?
That'd be fair.
Fair to say that if you did, it would be a big deal?
Absolutely.
Then explain this to me. How is it that Russ Westbrook, becoming just the second player ever to average a triple-double for a season last season, and then last night, after another incredible season, becoming the first player in the history of the NBA to do it twice, hasn't been a bigger story? Maybe because some say he's been padding stats. Here's Russ addressing the haters before last night's game.
A lot of people make jokes about, whatever stat padding or going to get rebounds. If people could get 20 rebounds every night, they would. If people could get 15 rebounds, they would. The people that's talking or saying whatever they need to say, they should try and do it and see how hard it is. Since everybody's so, everybody wants to be talking, and you know, I'm tired of hearing the same old rebound this, stealing rebound, all this shit. I take pride in what I do. Come out and playing, and I get the ball faster than somebody else get to it. That's just what it is. If you don't want it, I'm gonna get it. Simple as that.
Okay, well, at least he's not upset about it. So
Tell him, Russ.
Good. That's good. Nick, stat padding aside, how impressive is this? Back-to-back triple-doubles.
Listen, last night was an odd game. Last night, Russ was not playing his typical game. Last night, they were playing the Grizzlies. He was out there to make sure he got the 16 rebounds he needed. But that's fine. They still won the game.
Is it different than LeBron being out there making sure he got his 10 points in 10
it's not.
minutes?
You know what?
Or
That is a great and fair point. LeBron played last night for one reason. To make sure he played in all 82 games, and once he was going to play in all 82 games, I ain't breaking this streak because we're resting now, so make sure he gets 10 points. It's a great comparison. What has happened with Russ in the triple-doubles in my eyes is this. Last year, Russ averaging a triple-double because it was so new and because we thought for a long time it would never be done again. The reason people know Oscar Robertson's name more than they know Elgin Baylor's name, it's not because Oscar was a wildly better player than Elgin. It's because Oscar has something that was attached to him. Oh, the only guy to ever average a triple-double. And we thought maybe the only guy that ever would average a triple-double. So last year, Russ doing it, in my eyes, was probably actually slightly overrated. It won him the MVP when I think he should have come in third in the MVP. And this year, now the backlash to the backlash has been, this year, him doing it again has been underrated. It was something, Chris, you and I were on the phone 2 weeks ago, and the Thunder game was on, but I didn't have the sound on. And I said to you, I was like, you know, Russ needs like 46 rebounds to average a triple-double. And you said, you're like, they just mentioned that on the broadcast. Like, no one's been talking about it. Like, it's flown under the radar this year as opposed to last year when it was clearly like a goal of his. And now people are acting like, oh, yeah, anyone could do it if they if they stat padded. Man, anyone could not do this. You don't think LeBron would have liked to average a triple-double one year? He hasn't been able to. Like, no one has been able to. A lot of guys would have liked to. So I understand Russ's pushback on this idea that it's a fraudulent accomplishment.
Well, there's a lot of ignorance in covering sports. And Russ is right. If you could get 15 rebounds in the NBA game, you wouldn't be sitting on TV talking about basketball. Someone would have you employed. You would be gainfully playing in an NBA jersey. And if there was an NBA player, you mentioned it, LeBron. The reason why LeBron don't average no triple-double, because he can't. Russ is the only guy in league history that has been able to do it. I mean, Oscar Robertson was a special basketball player. Not only did he have the ability to be able to score at 6'6", 6'7", his ability to be able to dribble the ball. He wasn't a once-every-decade type player. He was the only player in NBA history that we had seen like that. And then Russ comes along. And then now people talk about, well, it's easy to do. No, it's not. Russ is that kind of talent, but Russ is the kid that when he's playing in youth basketball, he's scoring all the points and getting to all the loose balls. Russ is that guy in the NBA.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't like it, that is your problem. But that is who Russ is. Watch the game. Watch when the ball. There are so many 50-50 balls that Russ gets to because of his tenacity, because of his attitude. And also, as far as last night's game is concerned, when you have played the NBA season the way these guys have, when you averaged a triple-double the year before, you have earned the right in the 82nd game of the year to go out there and chase the stats because of what you did on a nightly basis. LeBron James, when you have scored how many games over 10 points?
It's 871, 879.
So go out there and get your double.
When you have played 81 games, all of them, when your team, as Coach pointed out, that they've been through basically 3 seasons in one, you have earned the right to do that. So for me, I don't think, and I'm from Russ's camp. You know, I question what your basketball IQ is in watching Russ and realizing that anything that he does, it's not easy to be able to do that.
Why isn't this a bigger deal then? Are we?
I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
It's because the guys who cover the league who might have the highest scored IQ, when you say basketball IQ, just general IQ, we have in a way swayed too far in the analytics direction. I love the basketball analytics. You know, I bring up stats, value over replacement player, box score plus minus, true shooting percentage, effective field goal percentage, a lot of things that I think are valuable and important. But there is no way to measure the boost that team gets when Russ comes flying in from 18 feet out for a putback. That is immeasurable, but I watch these games, and it gives them a boost. There is no way to measure the ability he has to inspire his teammates to play harder in Game 63, because this guy's been playing that hard from Game 1 of his career to right now. There are fair criticisms of Russ. He takes too many threes. He can sometimes not be the easiest guy to play with. Maybe if he had adjusted his mentality slightly, KD would still be there. There are fair criticisms of him. But to criticize him because he busts his ass every night and says, I'm going to do something no one's ever done, and I'm going to be one of the 10 best players in the league en route to doing it, that's ridiculous. Like, we can't go so far as to where we only look at the analytical numbers and not look at what we're seeing, which is this guy's a freak. And we've never seen a player quite like Russell Westbrook.
I'm Jenna Wolf, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.